Hello everyone, this video is going to be all about this palette, which is my main watercolor palette. Now, this has been what I've been using for watercolor for probably pretty much since I basically started in watercolor about 5 years ago, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. So the Winsor Newton Cotman palette, which is like this section, is pretty much almost the first watercolor palette that I bought, and I've just kind of added to it. So this has lasted me and been with me a very, very long time. So I think I'll just talk you kind of through because, you know, I'm sure like this is pretty customized, so I will be going into swatching these because I have a really cool new swatch sheet that I want to do. So yes, like I said before, this main thing here, I'll take this out. This main part here is pretty much the complete 48 Winsor Newton Cotman half pan set. I have substituted out a few colors with professional Winsor Newton colors. I will get to those when I swatch them, but basically this whole thing is the 48 half pan set. Now, this thing here is actually from another watercolor palette. I'm pretty sure that I stole this one off of my White Nights palette, just because the Winsor and Newton one here, I actually have it here. This is the one that comes with this palette, and as you can see, it only has 8 paint wells. So when I saw the White Nights watercolor palette, which I do have, so it's not like I just randomly found this one, I basically just took it off of that one because you get 4 more wells, because I just find that the wells in the normal one are a little large for my liking, and this one works a whole lot better for me personally. And it actually does fit in this perfectly. I don't normally snap it in because I kind of take this off and move it around depending on kind of the area that I'm working in. But the White Nights watercolor is actually in the same like plastic container as the Winsor Newton Cotman. So if you have those and you like that one, this one will actually fit in here and like fully close up and everything with that one. So the part that I removed here is actually one of those like refillable watercolor things you can buy, like the metal containers, and you can actually remove like the insert that holds the plastic pans. And so that's what I've done just to kind of minimize my desk space, and I just stick it into the top of the plastic palette like that, which it fits in perfectly. So just I guess a run through of this upper area, because this one is definitely much more, I won't say random, but not as like uniform as like, oh yeah, this is all Winsor Newton Cotman. This top row here is completely Winsor Newton Professional colors, and they are kind of in color order. These 2 paints here are actually Cotman colors. It is sepia and indigo, and the reason they're there is because I've actually substituted them out. So this is the Winsor Newton Professional indigo, and this is the Winsor Newton Professional sepia. But I do still really like using those because sometimes I find that the professional colors are almost too pigmented, so when I need something a little more translucent, I definitely still reach for those, which is why they're still in this upper part and kind of just sectioned off strangely here. Now the rest of this whole section is Daniel Smith watercolors. This upper section I know might seem random, but it's mainly that these were kind of my main, like these were the first Daniel Smith colors that I went after, and they are like fully in color order. And then these ones are just random ones that I have added since then, and I don't want to like disrupt this flow, so there's just kind of like random uncolor order thing going on up here, and then obviously some blank spaces there if I ever find another Daniel Smith color, whatever, that I want to add to this main setup. I have some expansion room. But yeah, that's kind of why there's like these random colors out here. It was mainly that I did not want to touch these because I know what all these colors are. They're obviously very dark, so that's also kind of why like you pretty much can't tell what watercolor is what unless you know what they are, and because I've been working with those for so many years, I didn't want to touch them. And then there are just some full pans in here of some Daniel Smith colors that I use a lot. So that's just kind of that. So now we're going to get into the swatch sheet, which of course right now is blank, but I did want to show you it because I think it's a pretty cool idea, I guess. So this, I think you can see those little marks. I do actually have a swatch sheet that I decided to do of just the Winsor Newton section, but I think it's time to upgrade it and include the whole color range. So this I actually drew up on a watercolor art board, which means it is like fully mounted and super strong, which mainly I kind of did, other than this one was kind of an extra one in my off section because when I removed it from the packaging it kind of ripped a bit of the paper there, so I didn't really want to use it for anything too important. So a swatch sheet would make a great not too important thing to use on it, but also because it is rigid, it's really easy to like set up on things. I know the one that I have right now, it kind of curls and it's really hard to set places, and I thought having like a rigid board was going to be very helpful in kind of setting it up and placing it areas. And I've gone a step further because I do have so many paints. And normally I would not be bothered with having the names, but I figured I might need it for YouTube videos or something just to kind of know what the colors are. I am actually going to have to look up what most of these are because they're only like labeled on the sides of the pans, and because they were the standard Winsor Newton watercolor set. I'm not entirely sure what all of the colors are because I haven't touched them. So I'll be like looking that up. And for that, I decided to put on this sheet of vellum on the top. Of course, you can't see it because it is translucent. But yeah, that is there. I put these little rings, like I punched some holes into the artboard and put some rings just to hold it there. Just in case, like I said, if I ever need it, I can, like I'm going to write the colors on this. I'm going to do the swatches first, but then write the colors on the section so that it's kind of like the master sheet that I can see what color is named what, just in case I need it for videos or something. Because I know for videos right now, I've been having to like take each pan out, and like for the pans that I make, like all the Daniel Smith ones, I always write on the sides what the watercolors are. But you know, sometimes I have to check if I'm refilling the pans because I'm not 100% sure. So this is definitely going to come in helpful, but like I said, I wouldn't normally be bothered on having the names on normally, like on the normal swatch sheets, so that's why there's like an extra step to this. But I just wanted to show you that because I thought some of you might be interested in doing a similar setup to that as well for your watercolor swatch sheets. So I guess I'm just going to go ahead and start swatching all of these paints and telling you what each individual paint is. So I'm actually going to start with the lower section of my palette, which is mainly the Winsor Newton Cotman section. So assume that they are all Cotman watercolors unless I specifically mention otherwise. First up, we have Lemon Yellow Hue, then Cadmium Yellow Pale Hue. Next is Gamboge Hue. This might actually be my preferred yellow watercolor. Now we have the cadmium string of things. First up is Cadmium Yellow Hue, then Cadmium Orange Hue, Cadmium Red Pale Hue, then Cadmium Red Hue, and finally a Cadmium Red Deep Hue. Very original color names. This next one is Alizarin Crimson Hue. And this is actually the first color that I've added to this part of the palette. It is Winsor Newton Professional's Perylene Maroon. Continuing on from there, there is Permanent Rose, Rose Madder Hue, Purple Lake, Mauve, and Dioxazine Purple. Now starting on the next row, we have Ultramarine, Cobalt Blue Hue, Cerulean Blue Hue, Turquoise, which is one of my absolute favorite colors. Next is Intense Blue, which in brackets is Phthalo Blue, and Prussian Blue. This one is another Winsor Newton Professional watercolor, and that is Phthalo Turquoise. Then back to the Cotman colors, you have Intense Green, which in brackets is Phthalo Green, Viridian Hue, Emerald, Hooker's Green Dark, Hooker's Green Light, Sap Green, then another Winsor Newton Professional watercolor, Perylene Green, and the final color in this row, Raw Sienna. Starting the next row with another Winsor Newton Professional color, this one is Naples Yellow. Then we have Yellow Ochre, Raw Umber, Burnt Sienna, Light Red, Indian Red, Burnt Umber, Van Dyke Brown, and these next three are all Winsor Newton Professional colors. So first up there is Sepia, then Perylene Violet, and finally Indigo. Then back to Payne's Gray, which is my all-time favorite Payne's Gray, Ivory Black, Lamp Black, and finally Chinese White, which looks pretty gray here, mainly because my water was filthy at this point. Now to the upper super custom section, starting with the Winsor Newton Professional watercolors. First up we have Neutral Tint, then another Payne's Gray, Winsor Red Deep, Quinacridone Magenta, Winsor Violet Dioxazine, Cobalt Turquoise, Terre Vert, Terre Vert Yellow Shade, Potter's Pink, Caput Mortuum Violet, Dark Brown, and finally Mars Black. Now these two off to the side here are the ones that I mentioned before. They are both Winsor Newton Cotman colors, and they are Sepia and Indigo. And now moving on to all of the Daniel Smith paints. The first one up here is Perylene Scarlet. Then we have Perylene Maroon, Fuchsite Genuine, Hematite Violet Genuine, Quinacridone Gold, and on the end here, Sepia. The next row starts with Quinacridone Coral, then Opera Pink, Ultramarine Red, Ultramarine Violet, Cobalt Blue Violet, Moonglow, which is of course a very famous watercolor, Shadow Violet, which is actually very similar to Moonglow in its color changing properties, Sugilite Genuine, which you can't really tell on camera, but it is actually fairly sparkly along with the other one next to it, which is Kyanite Genuine, then Indigo, and Mayan Dark Blue. And the final row starts off with Indanthrone Blue, which might be my all-time favorite watercolor paint. Then French Ultramarine, Phthalo Blue Red Shade, Prussian Blue, Cobalt Teal Blue, Phthalo Turquoise, Amazonite Genuine, Cascade Green, which again like Moonglow and Shadow Violet has color-changing properties, Quinacridone Deep Gold, Naphthamide Maroon, Hematite Genuine, and finally Lunar Violet. And here is my finished swatch sheet, all labeled. I actually, in the top corner of each swatch, put the brand of the paint just so that I knew 100% what brand it was. Obviously right now it's fairly well organized, but in the future that might change. And that is my watercolor palette. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.